Welcome to CISO Conversations, EU Data Regulations. I'm your host, Kev Johnson. We're serving you insights and best practices from people like yourself, regulation contributors, providers and leading experts on data security on how the upcoming rollout of multiple data regulations within the EU is putting everyone's mind to the test. In our first two episodes, we discussed NIS2 versus DORA, how they overlap, and where to focus your IT investments for compliance. If you missed that discussion, go and add them to your listen list right now and make sure to hit that subscribe button to not miss out on future episodes. In today's episode, we turn the spotlight on DORA and dissect why DORA makes operational resilience a priority for financial services organisations. We've invited EMEA Field CISO Richard Cassidy and Anna Delaney, journalist and producer at ISMG, into the studio to further break down the DORA regulation and share insights on where IT leaders should focus their efforts and resources to turn compliance into a strategic advantage. We'll keep today's episode short and to the point, but if you want just one brain twister, make sure to flip your ears forward when Richard talks about DORA requirements for third-party risks and how this expands DORA's reach beyond financial organisations. Enjoy.
So Richard, to begin, can you provide an overview of DORA and its significance for regulated financial institutions in the European Union and the UK?
So look, absolutely a critical question. And without overcomplicating it, DORA is a digital operational resilience framework. It's aimed mainly at financial institutions, although I do believe there's benefits outside of the financial institutions vector for sure. So if you're a bank, payment provider, insurance house, you want to be really following DORA from a perspective of protecting against, responding to, and recovering from different ICT-related attacks and threats. And that's really what DORA is about. It's this framework that sets a set of principles and articles that ensures your organization are able to respond to and recover from different related attacks in the ICT environment. Now, in a more detailed level, DORA kind of sits across a total of around 46 articles. It's quite a lot to consider as an organization. And there's not a lot of sort of connection between that and other frameworks as well. So you'll have heard of NIS2, you'll have known GDPR. There's a little bit of crossover, right, between those specifically. But with DORA, if we were to distill down all those articles and try to make it easy to understand, there's 5 key pillars. The first one is kind of risk management framework, right? How do you build a risk assessment, identification, and management framework around your ICT environment? And then you have what's called ICT-related incidents, right? So the reporting of major incidents to national competent authorities, and also those that need mandatory notification. And then the third pillar is the digital operational resilience testing. So DORA, being digital operational resilience, they want to ensure as part of this framework that you have a testing capability to prove that you are indeed aligning with the framework and do have operational resilience. And then the final two deal with, one is management of those risks. So how do you integrate with third parties? What's the lifecycle management, for example? And how do you engage with different stakeholders? And then finally is the information sharing arrangement. And this is a really good addition to frameworks because this talks about moving out of the siloed environments that we typically tend to operate in from a cybersecurity, cyber resilience perspective, and building a much more sort of capable, cohesive, coherent information sharing platform to essentially ensure tribal knowledge amongst the peer organizations to and ultimately better protect businesses and the organizations. So that's DORA at a high level. There are some very strict timelines that are associated with that, which we'll talk about a little bit later, of course. But overall, these are the key things you're going to have to consider when it comes to the DORA framework.
So those are the key elements. How will it impact the cybersecurity and operational resilience strategies of financial institutions?
So the key thing to mention is it will bring key focus to operational resilience. And whilst businesses today have had an element of resilience, I would suggest from experience, there tends to be a lot of onus placed on the provider of technologies and services. So, for example, businesses that deploy SaaS solutions as part of the day-to-day operations that lift and shift a lot of workloads to the cloud will almost have this false sense of security that the cloud equals resilience, right? Because it's the ownership of the cloud service provider, or if I'm running services from a third party, it's their ownership. And more often than not, what we find in any breach scenario or major operational failure is, whilst some of the cloud elements can be recovered, there's those that can't be from a sort of colo or even an on-prem perspective, or even those that are running cloud as a platform as a service. So the biggest change we're going to see with organizations is their need to really focus on how they're building an operational resilience capability, and then how they're validating and testing that. And the other part, which was mentioned briefly earlier, is that we're going to have to get better at information sharing within organizational sort of towers, to sort of make it a simple analogy. And what I mean by that is, whilst we have information at our fingertips, whether it's an audit failure, a breach alert, some user activity that maybe falls outside of a framework or compliance mandate, with this information sharing framework that's being built into DORA, there's a lot of focus on the ability to get that data to other parties, to other institutions, this kind of multi-agency approach to information sharing, which essentially feeds the operation resilience ecosystem across all of the DORA-aligned framework organizations. So that'd be the two biggest changes. I think the third to mention, if we look at the other pillars that I talked about, is really just around your management frameworks, your reporting, your processes, making sure that they're up to standard based upon the EU legislation.
Now, compliance with DORA includes a focus on effective third-party risk management. What are the specific challenges you're seeing that financial institutions may encounter in implementing robust third-party risk management programs, and how can they address these challenges effectively?
Undoubtedly, third-party risk management has been the thorn in the side of a number of organizations, and I'm going to say a significant number based upon my direct experiences. If we look at where there's been significant failures, not just in policy and procedure controls, but also security controls, we're seeing a lot of news in the breach releases in the last couple of months, last year, where it's been third-party breaches that have led to the overall breach of the organization itself. And so this is a really good aspect of what DORA brings to the table, because, as we mentioned earlier, the management of third-party risks is one of the key focuses of it. And so what that's going to do is make organizations have to really focus on how they're managing the visibility and inspection of third-party providers, and also how they're holding them to account. It's really important to say that it's not that I inherently trust third-party provider services or connections into my organization, but I'm now going to validate and constantly stress test and question what is going on, what are the contractual obligations and agreements, what are the functional and technological ones, and being able to also audit that from an operational perspective, not just writing text and saying, I have an agreement, I have a contract, but testing the security capabilities, testing their responsiveness to specific factors or events. This is really where we're going to see probably the most significant needed improvement in overall cybersecurity strategy over the last couple of years, in my opinion.
Now, in preparation for DORA compliance, how can financial institutions really assess their current cybersecurity and operational resilience practices to identify those gaps and areas of improvement?
Look, there's no doubt that there are organizations that will be listening to this webinar, reading articles about the timelines they've got with regards to DORA and having to meet those timelines. And the fallout of not meeting them is you're not able to operate with other DORA institutions. So it's a really critical part of what organizations have to focus on. But I think the main thing to talk about is just the gap analysis. One of the things I've seen in my conversations over the past 3 to 6 months around DORA and other frameworks as well is that there are a lot of capabilities within the organizations today to meet a lot of the outcomes that DORA, for example, requires you to meet to gain compliance. So this gap analysis is the first place to start. What have I got? What haven't I got? How do I bridge that gap? And as I said, you'll find more often than not, the bridge between those gaps isn't as long or as large as you probably once thought. And then building a very simple project framework to go and implement those parts where those gaps exist. I know that seems like a very simple answer to your question, but actually what you're going to find is the biggest challenges you will have is a lot of the things that DORA talk about are communication frameworks, processes, policy controls. And I do believe a lot of organizations, especially coming through off the back of the pandemic and the kind of the massive shift to working from home, is we probably haven't updated our policies in line with how the industry has been forced to change in significant ways. And this presents a great opportunity for us to really go back and re-engage the stakeholders across all facets of our business and third-party suppliers, and rewrite the policy playbook and the interaction playbook aligned to, for example, what DORA needs you to align to, but also other additional outcomes that will help ensure that you're not just hyper-focusing on DORA, but you're looking at the entire cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and communication ecosystem. So that's where I see it happening. That's how I see the steps occurring. And of course, there are many more in between, and no one size fits all when it comes to framework alignment. Every organization will be at some part of the journey and in some level of that kind of security life cycle, maturity life cycle. But either way, it is achievable, and you'll be surprised just how much you probably already have to get you over the line with DORA compliance.
Now, you mentioned earlier that DORA is expected to require changes in processes and procedures for banks, but also fintech companies, insurance firms and other regulated entities. What are some practical steps these organizations can take to align their operations with DORA's requirements?
Yeah, it's a good question, and kind of goes back to an age-old adage that I really think everybody should be considered with outside of frameworks, but it's very important for frameworks. To fall into compliance with DORA or any legislative framework by the EU or others. And the UK are in a very different spot as well, in that they're not part of the EU. So do you have to follow DORA? Well, the answer is yes, you do. If you're going to transact with any DORA entity in the EU, you need to tick the DORA compliance boxes also. But it's knowing what you have, right? Because you can't become compliant if you don't understand where your assets are and what you have. So knowing what you have and where they sit, and then understanding the key points that DORA needs you to meet, right? And there's 9 chapters. The functional chapters that I like to say, the ones that really talk about technology and sort of tangible operational configuration changes, are those that are listed in chapter 2 to chapter 6. And there are about 27 or so articles that cover that. So look at those articles, look at the technology that you've got, look at the data you have, and look at where you align. And where you find there's no alignment, you got to ask yourself 2 questions. Is it because I just don't have the technology or the capability? Okay, well, if you don't, then you're going to have to go out and look at how you fill those gaps with technology. But like I said earlier, more often than not, they'll have the technology. There might be certainly some gaps in some of the core operational resiliency side of things, as I've seen in my last 6 months. But the functional stuff around risk management, detecting events of interest and using those events to go and perform for further actions typically tend to be within the capabilities of organizations today. And so it's just following that process across all of those chapters and getting to the point of compliance outcomes, or knowing where your gaps are, and then how long that's going to take to close those gaps, as it were.
What about incident response plans? How can financial institutions ensure that their plans, their incident response plans and business continuity strategies are in line with DORA's expectations for operational resilience?
Yeah, so with DORA, the good news is they're very prescriptive on what they want the incident response plans to look like, or how you manage ICT related incidents, how you manage third-party risks, how you share that information. And so does it mean that you need to adopt a new risk management framework? And that's the key thing here. When DORA was written up, it wasn't written or designed to be a forklift upgrade of existing controls and processes. It was meant to take what should be industry standards and enhance them. And where organizations maybe haven't applied the standards as they were written before DORA in a way they should have, DORA is going to help bring them to the current century, or the current year, if you like, in terms of alignment. So my advice is look at your existing risk management framework and risk response framework and controls framework. Look at what DORA is prescriptively asking you to do, and essentially make the changes you have to make to get there. And remember that this framework, DORA, is there to help, not hinder business operations. If you align to DORA, you're going to find that you're going to be in a phenomenal position to recover from a potential worst-case scenario where you may not have that capability today.
I want to double click on something you mentioned earlier, this need for cooperation and information sharing among financial institutions and regulatory authorities. So what strategies can you recommend to organizations to foster that collaboration and transparency in compliance efforts?
So there's two parts of the answer to that question. One is technology and the other is process, right? And people form a part of both of that. So from a technological perspective, you've got to now have a capability whereby the systems and tools that you're using have a level of translation or transability to other tool sets. And look, we're living in an API first world. Most products have a very rich API capability. So your ability to be able to share that information in a controlled fashion, because remember, DORA isn't about just opening the book and allowing, unfettered access to all of your data. It's about still in a controlled fashion, because that has to be how we operate. It still has to be protection mechanisms. But as long as you have a technology ecosystem that is built with that mantra in situ, API first framework, with the ability to take data and very simplistically manage it and present it elsewhere. And in more cases than not, you'll find that's just out of the box functionality with the technology you deployed. The other side is around the process, right? The when do you communicate this data, the frameworks by which you do it, the timeframes you have to adhere to, the checklist you must go through to understand when this data should be shared. And that's going to take a little bit more work, because that is something that's very specific to DORA and will require some fundamental changes to probably how you've communicated as a business before. So it's certainly worth spending a little bit more time there, because there's a number of tweaks that you may feel expose you, but actually in reality don't. They're there to help you, because you're going to receive the benefits of that data from other parties as well in the event that they may suffer a breach, which will ultimately end up helping you, because the more you know about what's happening in your peer environments, the more secure you can be, and vice versa.
Are there any steps to avoid?
Yes, don't overthink it. As with all frameworks, you can become hyper-focused in going through the motions and the steps and taking all the articles, right? There's 56 articles in total, as I said. What you don't want to do is say, right, okay, let's start at Article 1 and let's look at all the subsections, right? It can be A through to D and E in some cases, and go, right, how do we align? What's the technology? Because you get to the end of that process, you'll probably look at yourself and think, oh my goodness, I've got 14 technology holes I haven't bridged the gap for. That's not the way to do it. I think the way to do it is in the domain level alignment. It's look at the domains, look at the technology that aligns to those domains, and then work back from there. If you're going to do it on an article basis, you're going to give yourself a really hard time. Now, that's not saying you shouldn't validate that you have aligned to each of the articles. You should, but don't approach it that way. Don't go through articles by articles and go, right, am I aligned, am I not? What's my gaps? Look at the domain level alignments, the 5 core pillars, and then align the articles there, and then align the technology across those. You'll find it's a much easier process and a much more manageable project to get to alignment.
Yeah, that's helpful. So no cybersecurity regulation ever really stays still, and DORA is expected to evolve and adapt to emerging cybersecurity threats. How can financial institutions stay agile and adaptable to meet future DORA requirements and maintain that operational resilience in a rapidly changing digital landscape?
So we've already seen DORA change, left, right, and centre, with all due respect to the legislators, and for good reason, right? Creating an EU-wide legislation isn't an easy task. And already the timelines to implement the Act have slipped, and we're now in October 24 to get aligned. But then there's additional parts of the alignment framework which don't immediately need to be implemented. For example, you've got at the moment, and it could slip to the end of 2025, to get in line with some of the implementation threat-led pen testing. And so what you're seeing there, right, and the answer to your question is, take a modular approach to how you build this out, right? Invest in technologies and ecosystems that allow you to very quickly plug into a new reporting framework or capability that allows you to interact with information from third parties to enact some real tangible control-based changes to your environment without the need for a forklift upgrade to new technology sets. So look at your existing vendors, ask whether they're the technologies and tools that are going to help you align to that modular, adaptive security framework need. And most should, but if you haven't got those technologies today, then you really have to start working to get there. And second, remember, a lot of what you have should get you there today. So just think about how you can work smarter with what you have, as long as it adheres to the previous point, and you'll find yourself in a very good agile position when it comes to the inevitable changes we're going to see in DORA over the coming years.
So what are the technologies that can help?
That is a good question. That's a big answer, but I'll try my best to keep it under a couple of hours. So the first thing, the way, look, this is bringing my experience to the table, okay, and there may be different answers to the question of other people, but 23 years in industry, here's what I've seen, here's what I've learned. It all starts at your ability to control the data. So, if you think about how you build a cybersecurity strategy or ecosystem, get the data, how do I maintain its validity? How do I inspect it? How do I control it? How am I able to back up from that data to recover? So that's the first thing. Have you got the right capability to look into, control, and store your data? If you haven't, then nothing else above that building is going to work. So let's assume you've got that layer. You've got a good backup, resilience, recovery capability. Now it's about, how do I inspect it? And so what platforms do I have that allow me to see what's happening within all of my data sets? And I'm talking about user data, application data, infrastructure data, cloud data, the list goes on, in a way that uses automation in a clever format, right? Because automation used in the wrong way can be very negative for organization. So we're looking at technologies there like security information event management platforms, which is a staple diet of any traditional finance organization anyway, because it's kind of part of what you have to build into your ecosystem. And then using machine learning, things like that through analytics and analysis tools, so user and entity behavior analytics. And then there's the ability to run the right level of orchestration and automation around that from an incident perspective. So using the right data points to detect the incidents, having the right tool sets to be able to run an incident from cradle to grave, as it were, all within the framework of DORA. So being able to create playbooks that really align to the DORA pillars and to each of the articles. So to summarize, and there are lots in between, right? I didn't touch on EDR, I didn't touch on security edge gateways, your user authentication mechanisms, your zero trust capabilities. There's a lot in between, but those three pillars are the core ones. So it's good control and resilience capability of your data. That's the core part of DORA. That's kind of what DORA is based around. It's the ability to be able to use all of that data and look at it in near real time, and even better, in real time, for the things that DORA wants you to find. So SIM, UBA, SOAR technologies. And then there's the ability to be able to report on that and manage the incident from end to end. These are going to be the core parts of what DORA is looking for. And the questions you've got to be asking of your technology ecosystem and framework. Because if you've got any gaps there, you've got some serious work to do over the next sort of 12 months.
Well, companies are always looking to gain a competitive edge in the industry. So in your opinion, Richard, what are the long-term benefits of DORA compliance for financial institutions, both in terms of cybersecurity and operational resilience? And how can organizations leverage these benefits to gain that competitive edge in the industry?
So in a nutshell, DORA, being the Digital Operation Resilience Act, is bringing focus on an area where organizations probably haven't focused as much as they should have. And I can say that, hand on heart, from the breach investigations I've been a part of, from nuclear power stations to car manufacturers, the worst days become an even more worse day, because the ability to recover from these cyber threats, from these breaches, from these system failures. I'm not just talking about breaches here. I'm talking about failures in critical national infrastructure systems, for example, that didn't have the right level of operational resiliency built in, and nor was it tested. And what DORA is going to bring fundamentally and so critically is the focus on organizations to get that right, to do it in a way that allows them to continue business as normal, even in the face of a catastrophic systems failure, or in the worst case, a significant data breach or ransomware attack. And so that bleeds in nicely to cybersecurity. You think about it, attackers today, especially ransomware, they hedge their bets on the fact that you can't recover your data, that once they've encrypted all of your files and folders and so on and so forth, that the only way you're going to get that back is by paying the ransom, right? And then we talk about extortion and double extortion. They want to get the data out of the building. And when they've got it out of the building, they're going to want to not just extort money from your organization, knowing that you can't get your data back and will want to pay the ransom, but then they've got your data, let's make more money off the back of it, let's sell it anyway. And so what DORA brings is the ability to kind of withstand that scenario, the ability to say, yeah, okay, I've been unfortunately hit by something like this, a ransomware attack, but because I've built a very well-oiled, well-tested, well-audited digital operation resilience capability, I can recover to a point in time that's known good, and I can withstand these types of threats that I'm seeing. So if you think about the competitive edge that gives you, that puts you in a really incredible position in the marketplace, because not that you should sort of sit and relax and think that your job is done and you can, not put as much focus and effort into developing your strategy. Not at all, but it does mean that you have the knowledge and you have the certainty and the capability of knowing that your worst day is simply a recovery to a known operationally good point. It's not a complete rebuild, a complete redeploy of your entire infrastructure. And that means if your competitors, and I'm hoping nobody suffers a breach like this, ever hit a problem like this, and they haven't put in the same controls that you're putting in, that they're not going to be able to continue doing business, or at best, they're going to be down for several weeks or months. DORA helps organizations get to a point where they don't have to suffer that. They're really in a position where they can operate immediately within minutes or hours, even from the worst case scenario. And I think that's the key thing from a resilience and cybersecurity perspective. That means DORA is something we should all focus on. Financial institution or not, this is a great framework that's going to help bring some tangible benefits to resilience and cybersecurity.
Well, this has been an excellent overview of DORA. Richard, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insight today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right, folks, that wraps up today's episode of CISO Conversations EU Data Regulations. Thank you for joining us. For more insights on navigating data regulations, join us next time when we walk you through what questions to ask so you can relatively easily reshape your IT strategy to include compliance with DORA. Rubrik is on a mission to secure the world's data. We help organisations uphold data integrity, deliver data availability that withstands adverse conditions, continuously monitor data risks and threats, and recover their data when they're attacked. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to not miss out on future episodes. See you next time.